When we think of the people who shaped this region, we often think of the heads of states, presidents, prime ministers, those kinds of people. But a lot of changes came from people not at the forefront of society. They came from the people on the ground, organizing and unionizing the working class. Over the centuries, history has systematically suppressed marginalized people's voices and buried their accomplishments in obscurity. Within those groups, the stories of women are even harder to track down. There seems to be a gap in the history of radical women in the Caribbean. While it was very easy for me to find multiple articles and papers written on some of my favorite Caribbean revolutionary men, it was hard to find information on more than a select few great Caribbean women of the past. And that's when I realized how important today's video would be. This week, we're going to look at 5 Caribbean women who fought for social, economic, and political change, and shaped the Caribbean that we live in today. First up, Queen Nanny. According to legend, Queen Nanny was born in what is today Ghana, of the Ashanti people. There are 2 versions of her story, one where she came to Jamaica as a free woman of royal blood, and in the other she came as a slave but then escaped by jumping off the ship while it was still docked offshore. Whichever is true, it is maintained that she was always free in Jamaica. She fled to the mountains and settled with other Maroons on a ridge high above the planter settlements. By 1720, she headed a large community made up of free and runaway slaves. This settlement was eventually named Nanny Town. Queen Nanny organized and led her people in extended fight against English subjugation and enslavement, often raiding plantations for weapons, burning the plantations, and leading free slaves to join them in the mountains. During a period of 30 years, she was credited with freeing more than 1,000 slaves. Her Maroons were innovators in guerrilla warfare. They used surprise, the knowledge of their terrain, and cleverly chosen positions to their advantage in fights against the British. Nanny's troops were so proficient at disguising their location that the British soldiers circulated tales of trees in the forest becoming alive and cutting one's head off. To heighten the enemy's fear, Nanny's forces never killed all of the attacking force. She would always allow a remnant to live to return to base and relay the story and horror of the encounter. Nanny's life and accomplishments have been recognized by the government of Jamaica, and she has been honored as a national hero and awarded the title of Right Excellent. Currently, there are only 7 such national heroes, and Nanny is the only woman. Next, we have La Mulatto Solitude, or the Mulatto Solitude. Though very little is known of her, the Mulatto Solitude remains an important anti-slavery figure in Guadeloupe. She was born on the island of Guadeloupe around 1772. Her mother was an enslaved woman from Africa, and her father was a sailor who raped her mother at sea when she was transported from Africa to the West Indies. Because she was noted to have pale skin and pale eyes, she was given domestic work rather than being forced to work in the fields. She saw the abolition of slavery in 1794 and joined a Maroon community in Guadeloupe. In 1802, when Napoleon Bonaparte enacted a law reinstating slavery in the French colonies, the Mulatto Solitude, a few months pregnant, joined the fight for freedom. After 18 days of unequal combat between more than 4,000 soldiers on the French side and 1,000 regular soldiers on the side of the rebels were defeated. She survived the battle but was imprisoned by the French. Because she was pregnant at the time of her imprisonment, she was not to be hanged until November 29th of the same year, 1 day after giving birth. The Mulatto Solitude symbolizes the Caribbean woman and mothers who fought to protect the ideals of equality and freedom in the context of slavery. Third, we have Claudia Jones. Claudia Jones was a Caribbean revolutionary intellectual and community organizer who combined Marxist-Leninism, decolonization, anti-imperialism, and anti-sexist politics to make sense of the social and political situation of her day. Jones was born in 1915 in Port of Spain, Trinidad. Jones moved to the US as a child, from where she was later exiled for her communist beliefs after serving 9 months in prison. Jones moved to the UK in 1955 and was a part of a larger movement of black writers and artists who aimed to empower black diaspora through cultural education and representation. Following the Notting Hill riots, where gangs of white residents attacked the homes of their West Indian neighbors, Claudia sought to wash the taste of Notting Hill out of our mouths. Carnival and its bright celebration of black freedom in the Caribbean was a perfect way to heal, and Claudia organized the first Caribbean Carnival in Notting Hill, paving the way for what is the largest street festival in Europe today. Jones's carnival was mainly celebrated by West Indians and became a yearly festivity until her death in 1964. Although considered a female political and intellectual equivalent of CLR James, the exclusion of her insights and analysis from historical discussion has set back the urgent theorizing of questions concerning women in general and black women in first and third world countries. Elma Francois was a domestic worker and labor organizer, and has been described as one of the most vociferous Afrocentric activists in the history of Trinidad and Tobago and in the Caribbean region. Francois was born in St. Vincent and migrated to Trinidad and Tobago as a worker in 1919, where she joined the Trinidad Workingmen's Association. Her militancy, grounded in Garveyite consciousness and working class politics, immediately put her at odds with the Cipriani leadership of the TWA. Later, Elma Francois founded the Negro Welfare Cultural and Social Association, a Marxist-oriented labor organization that sought the empowerment of primarily Negro people, but recruited non-Afro members as well. What made this organization different from many of the other organizations in the Caribbean at the time was Elma Francois' insistence that there should be no sex separation in the executive structure of the NWCSA, unlike the other organizations of the time, which had a women's arm/auxiliary, instead of gender equality in the leadership. Elma Francois was the first woman in the history of Trinidad and Tobago tried for sedition in 1938. She did not hire a lawyer but defended herself. According to Rhoda Reddock, when asked by the prosecutor why she was stirring disaffection amongst the subjects of Her Majesty, she replied, "I don't know that my speeches create disaffection. I know that my speeches create a fire in the minds of people so as to change the conditions which now exist." In 1987, 23 years after her death, she was posthumously declared a national heroine of Trinidad and Tobago. Last, we have Celia Sanchez. Most people know Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, but fewer people have heard of Celia Sanchez, the woman at the heart of the Cuban Revolution, and has been rumored to be the main decision maker. After the March 10, 1952 coup, Celia joined the struggle against the Batista government. She was a founder of the 26th of July movement, leader of combat squads throughout the revolution, controlled group resources, and even made the arrangements for the Granma landing, which transported 82 fighters from Mexico to Cuba in order to overthrow Batista. After the victory of the revolution, she launched numerous projects that enriched the lives of many Cubans, from parks to literacy programs to helping develop the Cohiba cigar brand. Since her death, Celia Sanchez has been virtually canonized by Cuba as the woman who most embodies its revolutionary ideals, with countless hospitals and schools named after her. In a speech at the dedication of a hospital to Celia Sanchez, Castro stated, "I truly believe that this is the best form of tribute to pay to someone who dedicated herself to duty, without resting for a moment, without forgetting one single detail, and I believe sincerely that this is the most heartfelt, profound, and revolutionary homage one can give to a compatriot who gave her life for the revolution." There are many other women who left a lasting impact on the Caribbean. These are just a few to get the conversation started. If you like this more listicle style video, let me know in the comments. They're not as deep, but they are pretty fun to make. Let me know your favorite Caribbean revolutionary down in the comments. If you like this video, be sure to like and